It's the Bill King Show, January 28, 2023. Making it through to the other side. In the house, Jessica Bellamy.
Hey, all you Aquarians.
Aquarians.
It's your happy birthday to all the Aquarians. Yeah, it's our time. I love it.
February is your time, right?
February is my time. I'm on the cusp, so I'm at the very end of Aquarius.
Okay, so which means when?
The 18th.
18th of February.
February, yeah.
Okay, it's not the 14th.
No. I know. You missed
out on that one.
By 4 days. Like, dang it.
Yeah. That's all good anyway.
Yeah.
Great week so far?
Oh, terrific week. And terrific show today, too.
Yeah. Well, we went out to the Redwood Theater.
Yes, we did.
And we met Maria.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a great place to do things, isn't it?
It's a beautiful theater. Everything that Maria has done to update in the past 3 years and her vision for the theater and the vision for its place in the community and what it will bring for local artists and celebrating art in whatever its form. It's super eclectic place, a bit of circus and music and other types of art performances and small plays. And wow, it's just so much potential.
Well, this is like her dream is to create an arts and cultural institution in the East End of Toronto.
Yes.
And this is Gerrard and Greenwood area.
Yeah.
And I was telling her, much like how Ossington developed into this wonderful restaurants and key area, the East End will undergo this eventually too. But we were driving out there and totally into the visuals, how streets look.
Yeah.
How they unfold, the houses, the facades, and how Leslieville developed. This has the same vibe along Gerrard because Gerrard's East Indian. Mm-hmm. And that community has sprawled right out. It's beautiful. The food and everything, it has a vibe to it. And then there's that pocket in between there where there's not much. And then by the time you get close to Greenwood, there's going to be something.
Yeah.
It really lends itself to development of this kind.
And small businesses of restaurants and cafes and things that bring people out and congregate. Yeah, so there's lots. And also it's also something important, in keeping with the integrity of the architecture, because you don't want it to be all glass and steel. You want to keep what people come to Toronto for the character, and not like the big box development. Their idea of what Toronto should look like. Yeah,
it should look like streets. It should look like historical in a way. Mm-hmm. That's the draw. We got a great show today. So first up is this conversation I had with Bill Straw of Blick Street Records. And Bill was there at the beginning of Eva Cassidy's recordings, of getting them to the public. He was there as she was about to pass away in 1996 from melanoma. I guess the family had contacted him and he heard these recordings and figured out a way how to get those out to the public. And we have her now with the London Symphony Orchestra, going to be 60 years old February, and an amazing work. You heard a bit of that the other day.
I'm telling you, people, you're in for a treat. She's going to blow you away when you hear this.
What they've done with her voice.
What they've done with her voice and the London Symphony Orchestra backing. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful tribute to her artistry and to someone who it was just been an unknown, right?
Yes, to memorialize a person like that who's just one of the greatest singers of all time. Mm-hmm. Jesse's here today. Gloria Martin's on her way to Florida. So Jesse's in talking about the Abbey Road doc. So and other things. So he's always great. And you talked to who?
Ernesto Cervini. He and his sister Amy Cervini filmed a documentary called Finding Joy. And it's their journey to Knowlton, Quebec. And that was the town that inspired Three Pines, the fictionalized town from Louise Penny's detective novels. So, and his album Joy is inspired by those novels too. So it's a treat.
You know what I have too? We have, I put together this reading of this piece I wrote about Jeff Beck, and it's called The Guitar Guides. Maybe I'll play that too.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah, let's do some Beck.
Yeah, Bill King Show, CIUT 89.5 with Jessica Bellamy.
Tall trees in Georgia, they grow so high, they shade me so. And sadly walking through the thicket I go. The sweetest love I ever had, I left aside because I did not want to be any man's bride. But now I'm older and married I would be. I found my sweetheart, but he would not marry me.
Now, your association with Eva Cassidy and the family goes back to when?
1996. Well, it's actually 1997. I first heard of Eva in about 6 weeks before she passed in 1996. We had another artist, Grace Griffith, who called me, and we had just released Grace's first album. Or the first album that we released. She'd done a lot of things before. And she just said, this is a quote, "We have this wonderful nightingale I think we're going to lose. Can I send you a tape?" And, by all means, And she told me the story about, she gave me a thumbnail sketch about Eva. And about 2 days later, a tape arrived. The cassette tape that she'd made arrived, queued up. It was the Live at Blues Alley album, queued up to Fields of Gold. And so that was the first thing I heard. And it didn't take a genius to know immediately that, within seconds of hearing her vocal entrance, I knew it was extraordinary. And by the time I heard the whole album, I said, my God, this is one of the best singers I've ever heard.
Oh, I agree.
Immediately, she covered Ella, she covered Aretha, she covered Bonnie Raitt, she covered Roberta, and added her own thing, and didn't just copy it, but infused that stuff into her own unique, style. And it was like, oh my God, where has this person been? And at the same time, I'd been told she was dying. So it was like a shock. And my first thought was, this girl's going to be famous and she's not going to live to enjoy it. And, and I didn't, I thought about going back to meet her, and that felt like ghoulish, weird. because I knew she had a lot of friends and was surrounded by family, and all she needed was strangers coming in saying, "I just would like to meet you, but while you're here," you know what I mean. And I didn't know whether her parents would want to market her music or not. I certainly knew that if I was in that situation, I'd want my music out, but you can't speak for somebody else. I stayed in touch with Grace Griffith, who was the artist that had sent me the tape. And if you can imagine a singer sending you Eva Cassidy's music, that was a major surprise also, because most people really wouldn't want to have their music played next to Eva's.
There's so much from this point on told of her story, but when you say she sang Smokey Robinson, she sang John Lennon tunes, she sang Tennessee Waltz, Red Stewart. What was this woman's childhood like? I mean, to come into this music and then take it over and then to turn into one of the greatest singers of all time.
Well, it's first off, initially all I heard was the Blues Alley album. And I heard she'd done a duet album with Chuck Brown, The Other Side. So I heard that album, and there was Over the Rainbow was on that album. And so I kept in touch with the situation through Grace. And she won all the Whammy Awards weeks after she died. And I kept up with what was going on with the parents. And so I made a trip back to Maryland in April. And by that time, I had made contact with the parents through Grace and through and there was an attorney involved who had a health issue of her own. So there was minimal contact, but there was some contact. And so I went back and met them all in April. And at that point, they had shopped the thing to various people. And they started with Blue Note,
right,
who had financed the demos. That was a lot of the stuff that was that I heard. And I didn't hear that stuff. Well, I didn't really hear that stuff until I went back there. And I hadn't heard Tennessee Waltz. I didn't hear Imagine for a long time. But they arranged a meeting at Chris Biondo was her ex-boyfriend producer. And if it hadn't been for Chris, none of the recordings would exist, or at least not many. But he was a guy who, she came in and did a demo one day with a band, and he immediately heard it. And he hooked her up with Chuck Brown, and then Chuck heard it, and that's why they did the Other Side album. And every time he got a chance, he brought Eva in to sing a demo if somebody needed a demo singer. And then they were recording, he formed a band, after the Chuck Brown thing, and they started playing out. She also did some solo stuff. And but she had a history of performing. She'd been in bands going back to junior high school. And her father was a guitar player, and her brother was a violin player. So they kind of had a family group. So she'd been playing music in one form or another most of her life. After she got out of high school, she was talented as an artist. And so she thought about it. She almost came to L.A. to work to go to school, and it was kind of a feeder school to go to work for Disney as a animator, and then that didn't work out, and she went to school in the Maryland area, and that didn't work out either because they were trying to tell her how to do it, and even that she didn't take direction. She gave direction.
Right.
And but she took a day job in a nursery where she worked for years, lived in an attic apartment at her parents', And, she'd been listening to their music collections most of her life, playing guitar, practicing. So she woodshedded for a long time. And during that process, she had met Chris, so they accumulated this body of demos, really. Then the Chuck Brown thing came around, so Chris arranged to do that album. And so they accumulated over a period of years, several, which amounted to be, 150 or so marketable tracks.
This is Go-Go Chuck Brown.
Exactly.
Yeah, gotcha.
I was aware of him. I had worked at MCA when he had his hit with his group called Busting Loose.
Oh, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And
I never met him or anything, but I certainly knew about him. And then when Eva passed away, there was a lot of press, and there was a writer for the Washington Post who's a pretty fairly high-profile guy in music circles, Richard Harrington, and he wrote an extensive article on Eva and Chuck, and so there was a fair amount of information out there. But when I went in and heard this stuff, I'd been playing the Blues Alley album, and I had a few tracks that they were working on with what became the Eva by Heart album. That was the first studio album that she ever released, and it wasn't released until after she passed away. But they were working on that as she was going down. And so there were those tracks. There was Blues Alley, and then there was the other side, which the star of that album for me was Over the Rainbow.
That's right.
And so my marketing plan was what became Songbird, but I hadn't heard all the other stuff. If I'd have heard all this stuff, the album probably wouldn't be out yet. Such a strong album that when it starts to reach a tipping point, the people that first heard it are still on board as fans. And the closest thing that I thought of at the time was the first album by Roberta Flack, which was First Take. And that came out of the D.C. area as well, and she was obviously one of Eva's influences. And I remember that album. Les McCann produced it.
That's right.
Roberta was a school teacher of some kind, and she played in clubs. And Les McCann took her in, and they did First Take. So that was the kind of the model, the rough model for Songbird. But in retrospect, I realized we had a lot more material to choose from than Roberta did. She probably went in and recorded 10 to 15 tracks at the most, and came up with that, which I still think that's her best album.
Yes.
But we had a lot more material. We heard Mary Black on the radio, and that's what got us started. And that put us in touch with the public radio audience, which was the only thing I'd listened to since the 70s. And we kind of broke her in America, and went out, and I went out on her tour and met her audience, and the public radio audience, whether they're in Toronto or L.A., it's the same audience.
It's a huge audience,
and it's a huge audience, and I knew that they would eat up Eva, and so that was her starter audience, and that's how we got her started. I didn't know how it would go over with the broader audience. It actually went over well, better than Mary with the broader audience. But the pop people never played it, because the pop people only played records that sounded like all the rest of the records.
I interviewed Bruce Lunville years ago.
Wonderful man.
Yeah, so we're walking along. There's a Blue Note album cover exhibit at the Montreal Jazz Festival. This is going back maybe 12 years ago. And I'm walking along with him, and we're looking at the covers. And I asked him, I said, so what's the worst decision you ever made in life? And he goes, not signing Eva Cassidy.
It's because I talked to Bruce after that.
Yeah.
I had met him when he was at CBS.
Yeah.
And he was one of the better liked people. He was a real musician, and he was one of the better liked people in the business. And he knew exactly what Eva was, but he couldn't get his young marketing staff on board.
No, he said they were just determined. She's not a songwriter, so
They tried to put her in Pieces of a Dream, which she hated.
Yeah.
And they tried different things with her, and I can understand. He had never dabbled in the public radio market, so he didn't know about that. He learned about it through Eva, and that's why he signed Norah Jones. So his payoff was really Norah Jones. His tracks that he financed on Blue Note were the backbone of Songbird. Mm-hmm. And but we had contracts in place at that point where I couldn't go and suddenly do an album with Capitol, and my distributors would have gone nuts. By that time, we had a deal with Ryko. Mm-hmm. So it's a complicated world. I would have loved to have done a deal with Bruce, and he certainly was entitled to it.
Finding Joy. The title alone conjures up a wellspring of emotions. Ernesto Cervini's documentary takes us into the world of Canadian author Louise Penny's fictionalized town of Three Pines, the inspiration behind his latest album entitled Joy. With his sister and co-producer Amy Cervini by his side, they ventured to the quaint town of Knowlton, Quebec, to see for themselves the charm and the character that captivated their imaginations from Penny's New York Times best-selling Armand Gamache series of detective novels. I'm pleased to welcome Ernesto Cervini, Juno Award-winning drummer, composer, and bandleader, to The Bill King Show. Let's see what's up. Welcome to The Bill King Show, Ernesto.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been.
I think the last time you were on, we were discussing an album from one of your groups, Tetrahedron.
Yes.
I think, yeah, so it's been a while.
Yeah, that came out. I was one of the last gigs I played before the pandemic, was the CD release for that album. Mm-hmm. So it came out right around then. It's a crazy time.
It's good to have you because you have a new project. You have a documentary and an album. And the documentary is called Finding Joy. And in this, you and your sister Amy take us along for the ride to Knowlton, Quebec, a quaint Canadian town that inspired Louise Penny's World of Three Pines, and also the source material for your latest album, Joy. I find this so interesting to see a glimpse into the ideation of an artist's work and just a nice conversation. What prompted your decision to take us to film the journey and take us along?
I thought it felt like the right time to do something like this. When you make an album, oftentimes, for me at least, the inspiration comes from a bunch of different places, and most of my albums have been a collection of music that I've been working on that comes from different inspirations, if they're my own songs, or songs that I've always wanted to play, or whatever, music from the other musicians. And but this was the first time that I'd created an album that was a set of music that was really all based on one overarching theme. I love the idea of being able to create other things to accompany your album, whether it's a book of artwork or whether it's a documentary or something, just so that you can bring people in even more to what you're doing, because music can be pretty mysterious to people. And Louise Penny's been writing these great books there's 18 in the series now, so she's been doing it for, I'm assuming, at least the last 20 years. I started reading them about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but a while ago. There's so many fans of these books across the globe, really. So I thought it would be really nice to, be able to talk about the inspiration behind some of the specific songs. And then also selfishly, I just really wanted to go to Knowlton and check it out. And I really wanted to go with my sister because she's the one who introduced me to the books. She's read them even more times than I have. And I'm in the middle of reading the whole series for the third time. She's done it even more. She's even a bigger super fan than I am. And she co-produced the album and she sang on the album. So I'm really close with both of my sisters. I thought what a nice kind of excuse to get to go on this little adventure.
It's a lovely documentary. It's so sweet. I have a soft spot for siblings because I have two sisters too. So, and they're the best.
Yeah.
Sisters are the best.
Yeah, I agree.
What surprised you both about Knowlton and being in the inspiration for Three Pines? And were there any surprises? Did it change what you imagined?
To be honest, I think it was exactly how I had hoped it would be.
Nice.
It was really cool. There was a little part of me that expected the characters from the book to be there, because it's so real in my head that there was a little part of me that was waiting to see them. And then, obviously it's not going to happen. No, it was really, really sweet to see the bistro that inspired the bistro in the books, and to see this town and to talk to people. And we went to the bookstore there. There's an independent bookstore there. And the woman who owns it was there, and she was so sweet. And they have this whole corner dedicated to Louise Penny. And, and you can tell that she loves Louise and loves these books. And Louise loves this bookstore. She talks about it all the time in her newsletter and stuff. It was really great. And we went to this monastery, or this abbey, just outside of Knowlton. And it inspired the 8th book in the series. It's called The Beautiful Mystery. And The Beautiful Mystery was the book that inspired me to start writing all this music. It was during the time that I was reading that book that I got the idea to write some music, because The Beautiful Mystery, the book is all about music. And so I just had music on my mind while I was reading. And so it was really cool to make that whole connection. And then we went and we got to hear the monks sing. I mean, they weren't nearly as good as she describes in the book. These monks were fine. They were fine singers. But it was really cool to be there and be a part of it and just experience it. It kind of felt like walking into, a book that you've read. It was really neat.
When it comes to the music with Joy, it's great to see you have some amazing musicians and collaborators, and longtime collaborators too. And you did mention that Amy is also lends her voice as well as co-producing. How often do you both get to work together?
For a while there, we worked together a bunch. Okay. So I moved to New York in 2003 to do my master's degree, and Amy lives in New York. So from 2003 to 2007, I was living in New York. And for the last 2 years, when I finished my master's degree, I moved to Brooklyn, and I used to call Amy. We used to talk on the phone every day. We still kind of most days, but and I was in her band. And so we worked together all the time. And now that, I've been in Toronto for 15 years now. It's harder, we're different countries. It's not that far by plane. It's a quick trip, but it's hard to have, if I was in her working band, then she could only play when she could afford to fly me in, which wouldn't be very practical. So it's not as often, but anytime she comes to Canada to perform, I play with her. She had never been on one of my albums. I'm on her first 2 albums, but she had never been on one of my albums. So, it was really special to be able to have her come and sing and it was really exciting for me.
And we also in the doc we get a little glimpse of young Ernesto and young Amy performing,
and my sister Marisa. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we were on a cable access show called Tiny Talent Time, and I must be maybe 6 in that, or I'm really young. I'm probably 6. It's we don't let too many people see that video, But we just included a little tiny snippet of it just because it's funny and cute.
It melds so well, it blends so well in the story of the both of you on this journey and this connection that you both have to these stories, the beautiful work of Joy, of your album. Like it's a delight, it's a treat. You don't need to have read any of Louise Penny's novels to really understand and to feel those emotions and to get the whole feeling of what you're expressing. And it's great. It's really lovely. Does Louise Penny know that you've created this album and you have this documentary out? And
she does. I haven't sent her the documentary yet. Actually, I should do that. Thank you for reminding me. So I got in touch with her immediately. As soon as I got the idea, I got in touch with her, basically to ask for permission. Because, I don't know. This is her world that she's created, and I didn't want to step on her toes. I didn't want her to feel like I was trying to just ride on her coattails. So I got in touch with her right away, before I had done anything, and just said, listen, I'm in love with your books. I'm a musician. I'd really love to write a bunch of music inspired by your world. And she was very sweet, and she said, that's fine. And actually she was, very humble and lovely. And she said, I'm so honored, blah, blah. It was the nicest email. And then I have kept in touch. So I sent her a copy of the music as soon as it was finished. And again, she sent me the sweetest email back, saying that she loved the title of the album, which made me really happy because, the books, they're murder mysteries. So somebody dies in every book, which is not exactly happy or joyful. But they're really not about that. Like that's the plot that carries the book, but really the books are about love and community and human decency and empathy. And that's the part that I think people fall in love with, is these beautiful characters that she's created and this beautiful community that she's crafted and these incredible relationships that are complicated and these characters that are flawed but are beautiful. That was what I wanted to bring. Like, to me, although they're mystery books and although there is crime involved in every book in some way, it's all about the beauty. So anyways, she saw that, I think, in the music and in the title that's what I understood, is that I was getting from it, hopefully what she wants people to get from it is that it's not about the murder mystery is just the excuse to write another book about these incredible people. She's been really great, and she has a newsletter that goes out once a month. In December, she actually did a little plug for the album, which was really sweet. She mentioned it. It's kind of amazing because I wanted to make an album that, as you said, you don't have to have read the books to appreciate the music and enjoy the music. But if you have read the books, it's just an elevated listening experience because you read the titles and you can picture that character that this music is describing. So for me, the ability to reach jazz fans is important, but also I wanted to be able to reach Louise Penny fans who maybe aren't jazz fans and say, hey, look, here's some music. It's jazz, and maybe you don't think you like jazz, but maybe you do. Maybe you just need to find the right way to get into it and the right thing that'll pull you in and kind of welcome you. So by her doing that, it enabled me to kind of reach her fans, which is a lot harder without her help.
My author that I would just die to meet would be Judy Blume. Someone who left like an indelible mark on my adolescence, like, oh, if I could write poetry or like an homage of some way to her work. But that's incredible.
It was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Email makes it easier because you can just sit and you can work on an email for a while and then you press send and then it's out of your hands. You don't have to do it. You don't have to talk face to face. I have met her once face to face. And the music wasn't done yet. It was probably about a year after I had initially reached out to her, and she was at a event in Toronto at the Toronto Reference Library talking, talking about her books. And so there was a big lineup of people to like say hello and take pictures with her after. So I don't think she remembered me or why this young man was handing her music, because I brought a couple of the songs I had written. I was like, this is you. I wrote this for you, or not for you, but inspired by you. And she was like, oh, that's so nice. But I'm not sure she remembered me. But anyways, it was still great to meet her. And I'm hoping I'd like to meet her again now that this is all done. I'd really like her to sign one of these CDs.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
So now, where can we find Finding Joy?
So Finding Joy is on YouTube, and the easiest, if you go to YouTube and just search Finding Joy Ernesto Cervini, it'll come up. There's also a link on my website, so you can find it on there. Or if you go to Bandcamp, ernestocervini.bandcamp.com, you can find the video there. And that's also the best place if you want to purchase the album Joy, either digitally or physically. It's a nice way to buy music digitally because they give most of the money to the artists as opposed to some of the other places where you can get music. And physically, it's a great way to, if you want the physical music, you can go there and get it, and then I will send you a copy.
ernestocervini.bandcamp.com/album/joy.
Yes.
More info on TPR Records is tprrecords.ca.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ernesto.
Thank you.
Look who's in the house. Jesse King, welcome in.
Thank you for opening the door. I'd been knocking since 4 a.m.
I know, but it's not even Friday. You know that?
I figured if you get there early, you're going to get the first seat. First come, first serve.
And that's how it's done here at the Bill King Show. So you're up front. You're in your own seat. What's up?
I'm glad to be here. It's been a while.
I know.
And, we have history on these microphones here.
We do. And you've been on with Basement Sessions now, 30 years?
38 years. 38
years?
Yeah, I started when I was about 6.
Yeah.
It's commitment and dedication. That's all I want to say to all the children out there that are looking to...
But the show is terrific. It's reggae, it's electronic music, it's funk, it's everything else on
Hip-hop,
Fridays.
yeah. So
noon, right? On Friday?
Noon on Friday and then syndicated out there. But, like yourself, it evolves. And what started off as just kind of reggae, I got more into it, so I created segments where you have one of my favorites. There's always classic cuts, and then there's what's new. But hip hop throwback is probably one of my favorites because I dive into late '80s, early '90s, golden era hip hop, and it's a treasure trove. When you go back, like this week, I'll play Cypress Hill, the clean version, of course.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it entertaining.
Now, do you go back to '73 when it all began?
Grandmaster Flash, Kool Herc. Yeah.
Well, Kool Herc, they sort of give him the credit for being the first with the turntables.
He brought the sound system and turntable concept straight from Jamaica. So all this comes from Jamaica.
Right. Isn't that amazing?
I did a master class years ago at a festival, and it was just talking about how this little tiny island nation changed the entire planet musically. Because they gave birth to hip hop, but they took it. They recycled it. It came from country music and the R&B that they were listening to, plus mento and the indigenous sounds of the island. Expanded on that, turned it into their own, which became ska, then rocksteady, then reggae, then on. But that led us to hip hop. That led us to jungle, drum and bass. It led us to trip hop. It led us to dubstep. All of these are offshoots and influenced by this island.
And I was amazed early on when Pablo, in our early years back in the 70s, would play country music.
Yeah.
And he would say, Jamaicans have a real affinity for and warmth and embrace, and they do embrace country music, and then they try to turn it to reggae.
Exactly. Well, even in Barbados, down in the market there, they have that hut, like a little building where when you go inside, old wood place in the middle of the market, and
it's gone now.
It's only country music, though. But
that's right.
I got the spirit, and it would be whatever, Friday, Saturday.
The dancing in Ostens.
Yeah.
In the market there, fish market.
It was just an interesting thing to see.
I photographed there probably in the mid-90s. And it was on the weekends, the folks would come, and they've been doing it for 45 years by then, right? And they would come and dance, pair off together. On the outside in the parking lot, they'd be playing hip hop or they'd be playing dance hall music.
Yeah.
The young ones.
Yeah.
So you had these two worlds in that fish market, which was fantastic.
But what a great experience for
Yeah.
everybody, you know, especially the younger generation, at least seeing this and getting to hear these sounds, because it permeates you, whether you're listening to it on your own or not. It becomes part of who you are and your musical identification. Like you can remember these things. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about, you know, especially a lot of the music from the islands is, and Jamaica's probably the number one, they've maximized and utilized the tools of music that they had to recycle, reinvent, and push it forward. So classic sounds and songs from Studio One in Treasure Isle got recycled when the next style of music came. Right. And then the next style came, and they redid it, and they redid it, and redid it. So all these songs that you still hear, and I can go play and tour the world, I still hear the same rhythms all the time. They're still around.
They stick around, don't they?
Yeah.
So you're here because Gloria Martin's on her way to Florida. And you have anything? What did you bring? What do you want to
there's
talk
a couple
about?
of things I thought worth mentioning. I'm a big fan of Rick Rubin. And Rick Rubin's the Uber producer. And his claim is that he doesn't produce anything. You know, his goal is not to give you direction or ideas on how or where you should take your music. His sole goal is to get you to know your own music and identify, you know, your own, where you want to take the music and how to bring the best out of you. The second thing that he does is he aims for the most bare bones that any song can be. Strip away anything that's not necessary to get to the chorus. So like working with Johnny Cash, it was acoustic and Johnny, and it was brilliant. To, you know, Slayer, to the Beastie Boys, and
recently, well, I guess maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Madison Ryan Ward. Mm-hmm. You know, just down to drums, bass, and keyboard.
And he's the Buddha.
Great voice. Yeah, he's the Buddha.
He's the Guru Buddha. I mean, he's
sits back.
But he has a new book out.
Okay.
And
how's the book?
It's interesting. It's basically little chapters on. He said, I didn't ever want to do a book about himself. He goes, I'm not interested in that. Had nothing. What he's interested is the creative process. So he talks about how he works with different artists, what he's done, what they do. So it's a whole book about that. Even the cover is muted. Like it's got basically nothing on the front. Okay. There's no like hype. There's nothing to do with his past, Def Jam or any of these hip hop. Just gray. That's it, you know. But I started, and it's very interesting so far. And I think it's one of those things that you can pick up and put down periodically, and just to get some insight on, and maybe ideas on, as an artist or musician, producer, or singer, whatever you might be, on tapping into different aspects of your creativity and how.
And also the psychology of working with an artist. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's of the belief you really don't record nothing until you've spent some time with the artist up front. So that you find a comfort zone, find out who this person is, and then you will understand how you will work with this person in the studio.
They absolutely nailed it.
And I agree with that. Also, Rick Rubin and Paul McCartney 123 is now on YouTube.
Oh, is it?
The whole thing.
Oh, worth a watch.
Yeah, so those who can't afford Disney or whatever, you can watch this whole series, and it is brilliant.
Yeah.
What else you got?
The second thing, which ties right into Paul McCartney and the Beatles, is the movie about Abbey Road Studios, If These Walls Could Sing.
That's on Disney too, right?
That's now on Disney. Okay. Eventually it'll come out there. But it's produced and it was created by Mary McCartney, so one of Paul's daughters. And just takes a look at the history of Abbey Road, you know, from its inception. I think it was 1931. And at the time it was like the high-end studio, that it was the best, one of the best in the UK, potentially in Europe at that time. Just the acoustics, the technology, it all came together for recording orchestras. And it was an old house that they converted, a large house, be it, into these three different studios. They had like the one for the symphony, then the smaller one where the Beatles worked a lot, and then another probably smaller production studio. And just its evolution throughout the history, and how, you know, in the probably late 70s, early 80s, it was on the decline. Mm-hmm. It kind of fell by the wayside, and new management came in. Of course, they were accountants, so it was like they had a whole fire sale of their gear, which was, the guy who was running it was just losing his mind, going, these are gold, this stuff, we can't get rid of it, you know. Yeah. So he called Paul and he said, there's an auction, please buy as much as you can. And Paul did. I don't know how much or where it is. It seems like a lot of it's back where it is at Abbey Road, but throughout the 80s and into the 90s, it found its way again by doing scoring. So John Williams came in and did, I think it was Indiana Jones.
Yes.
And then, of course, the third trilogy of Star Wars. And from there, it just took off. So people like Hans Zimmer still use it because it has a very distinctive sound and quality that you can't find anywhere. And then after that, it was all the bands again.
But you know where it began, though? I think first it was Dutch Gramophone. That's who sort of run that studio in the 30s.
EMI.
Yeah, it was the classical side.
Yeah.
But I think it was Bernard Herrmann that came in and did a Hitchcock movie.
Okay.
And that sort of brought the film community, the musicians together. And then they decided 1955, okay, let's just become strictly a film studio orchestra. And to play, that's what they wanted to do. And so.
Well, that's also, it's pars for where classical music's sales had declined because your generation, the boomer generation, was coming up and they wanted pop music. That's what was becoming, what the kids wanted. And that's partially how George Martin got involved. Originally it was for comedy, but then he started seeing the writing on the walls basically, and he wanted to bring pop music in because he knew we could sell this. So I forget who was the big kind of rockabilly star that was probably would have come out as Skiffle. He's still alive too. But he was in the
Is this
film.
a British one?
Yeah. You would know the guy. I just can't think of his name. He was like just before the Beatles. But they all talk about their experiences there. I mean, when you see the room that the Beatles worked in, and they said they can't do anything. They will not change a baffle. They will not put new paint in it. Nothing, because they don't want anything to potentially change the sound. So when you see it, it looks like this run-down place. It's not a pretty place at all. No. But it's still got that vibe. So after all these years and coming up through the 90s and it's still where everybody goes to score a lot of films, but every artist wants to be a part of Abbey Road. That's the dream.
And on a plus side is that how they market those plugins, Abbey Road plugins, which are fantastic if you're recording at home, the strings, the room, the brass, and everything.
The reverbs, everything,
I have the strings.
Mrs. Mills piano.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, even the piano. Yeah, the piano
Mrs.
one.
Mills piano, where Paul recorded one of their songs, like one of 64 or something.
But you can buy those separately, plugins, if you're recording at home, and they work great.
Yeah.
The strings are outrageous.
Listen, if you can't afford to go there and record yourself,
you can bring the
$30. You've got a plug-in.
Well, the orchestra thing can get expensive, up $300-400 if you buy the complete orchestra pack. So it's great. One other thing I want to tell you about: Tone Bass is a geared towards classical piano. It's a whole course, but it's with some of the world's greatest classical pianists, and they teach. And then they dissect other classical pianists.
Fascinating.
So there's this wonderful read on Glenn Gould's music. And so it's Seymour Bernstein looks at Glenn Gould plays Mozart, just rips him apart.
Really?
In the same way when he gets to Bach. Other pianists, great pianists, young and old, they go through all the Bach stuff with him. And it's really weird because we listen to the music as we listen to it. They listen to it, well, is he
critical ear? Yeah,
is he being true to Bach? Right? But I love this thing in the Mozart one with Seymour Bernstein, where he says, it's this passage that they show this clip of Glenn Gould on TV and how he's playing this Mozart passage, and it's a trill. And he removes the trill and he plays the notes a little more evenly. And they just lose it.
They just get upset.
Oh no, I think it's got to be like a triplet.
Those moments you can look at this two ways. You can laugh and go, "That's just a little much." But the flip side is, you gotta love their dedication and the passion and the depth that they're willing to dive into, because for perfection.
Well, these are teachers.
Yeah,
these are instructors who've taught the greatest. What else? Give me one other thing.
One other thing. Well, let's see. Actually, I was curious because you went into the studio the other night, and going into a recording studio is a different experience than being at home, because you get to, it's a different process, different people, different energy, and lots of gear.
Yeah.
And so how was that? You have not been in a studio for a couple of years.
3 years, yeah. It was fantastic because it was Pat Collins, it was Heather Christine's session, and Mark Kelso. Great. So to be asked to do an arrangement, I did the arrangement for the group, and then come in. I try to be precise. You take what's on the paper, then you readjust the chords. You have to have passages, things. So this is her big dream thing, right? She got a grant to do this, which is wonderful. Lovely person, but they are great players.
You came in, and you brought the hot ones in there.
As soon as you start playing, you play it through the first time, and it's perfect. The chart is perfect. Then you go through again, and you go through again, and then you iron out all those details. Where's the space for you? How do we hold this chord? How do we do? There are things you do beyond. Many of the times when you go in the studio with players, you're just trying to get them organized. Yeah. With players of this caliber, they read it, they play it,
feel it.
You go to the next level.
Yeah.
And then by the time that you get to that final play, it's absolutely lovely. So the experience
great
was fantastic.
Yeah. One last thought. I have different playlists that I create over time for different moods, and one of them is like more of a indie rock. I love the energy when I'm going out for bike rides and stuff. And I came across this release. I don't think anybody's ever seen this before. It was brilliant. It's by the artist is Bobby Ramone.
Okay.
It's Bob Marley over Ramone's music.
I can't even imagine this.
It's spectacular.
Is it?
It's the way it was done is brilliant. It's timed well. I mean, but he adds names like Stirred Up, I Want to Be Dead, things like this. But it's very Ramones and Bob Marley, and it's Marley singing. I don't know how he got the rights to this.
Wow.
But I thought it was a great funny. Check him out if you're interested, Bobby Ramone.
Jesse King, Basement Sessions, Friday afternoons at noon, right here on CIUT 89.5. You'll be back in a few weeks.
Great to be here.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Is there a guitar god? Jeff Beck remembered. With the recent passing of guitarist Jeff Beck on January 10, 2023, the epithet, guitar god, appeared stenciled all over social media, etched on an imaginary canvas, a halo above the man's head. I once discovered the same for forward-thinking Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimmy Page, and others. That rare few that stand above middle ground, that region between black and white, unimaginable. Freddie King, B.B. King, Albert King, all the King's men, Albert Collins, Elmore James, John Lee Hooker, Wes Montgomery, Pat Metheny, George Benson, Charlie Christian, Django Reinhardt, Andres Segovia, John Williams, and Julian Bream, all apostles of the guitar. But is there, with all certainty, a guitar god? I'm repeatedly drawn back to that first listen, those initial Wes Montgomery guitar sides of my youth, that Redeemer admiration. Montgomery grew up 100 miles north of my hometown of Jeffersonville, Indiana. Dad, a promising guitarist, idolized Montgomery's hollow-body Gibson L5 and octave-style playing. Talk of the great circulated as freely as a dinner of chicken fried steak and gravy. There was no shortfall of Montgomery and Herb Ellis reverence. Likewise, the undersung and equally adept Jimmy Rainey took to Dad's universe a local hero. Rainey was Dad's work in progress, a heroin addict suffering from a retrogressive muscular disorder that bedeviled him his final 30 years. Prior to the affliction, Rainey played in the Stan Getz Group and the Artie Shaw Orchestra. Dad determined he was duty-bound to save the iconic musician from addiction hell, driving him to treatment centers. There were movements Rainey achieved on guitar that confused him, Dad tried to bring those to his narrow understanding of harmony and improvisation. But ongoing battles with PTSD and other ailments wouldn't allow the hands to cooperate. I get that. Most experiencing a first breath of music, join that caravan of the faithful. Follow wherever a newly minted leader takes us. A second recording, a third, and a fourth, each more illuminating and meaningful than its predecessor. Oh, how we wish to command an instrument with the same grace and dexterity. It was the same for me with pianist Oscar Peterson in West Side Story, Bill Evans' Sunday at the Village Vanguard, and Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage. To this day, those recordings remain immortal and impossible to imitate. I first heard the expression guitar god with the coronation of Eric Clapton, a member of John Mayall's Blues Breakers, in the summer of 1966. There was no Wes Montgomery or Herb Ellis twanging going on. This stuff cut to the gut. Stung like a herd of blissful hornets out for fresh meat, God was now packing a 1960s Les Paul standard, and the music world placed a crown on Clapton's head. I had heard Albert Collins' grinding shuffle Frosty on 45, Travis Wammack Scratchy, even caught him live several times. Lonnie Mack's Memphis, opened for Mack a few times, became fully versed in edgy guitar with more than a tinge of distortion. The Kinks, the Stones had already acclimated me to that. Yet there was something different in Clapton's tone, touch and delivery, relaxed phrasing and use of space. We can associate much of this to the time when the Yardbirds, along with fellow compatriots Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck. Imagine being a responsive teenager and hearing For Your Love on the radio. Besides that thin string vibrating guitar, a keyboardist on harpsichord, Brian Auger, and bongos a la carte. Bongos? All very strange to the ears. Clapton joined the Yardbirds at 18 and hung in for a year and a half before passing the torch to Beck, then Page. Playing on For Your Love and I Wish You Would, the first track with harmonica and semi-rumba beat. That Clapton sound was already taking shape, though the recording is absent weight, bottomless, and top-heavy. The guitar, a thin shred of audio capture. It's Beck's work with the Yardbirds that catches fire. The possibilities. Distortion, feedback, sustain, reverb, introduction of the fuzz tone, and orchestral palette of supreme invention put to great use. To come, the experimentation and growth front and center on Beck's solo debut, Truth, in 1968. That wicked wah-wah pedal added to his arsenal of weapons. That touch, notes played at different volumes, the control. A triple whammy. Truth solidifies the careers of not only Beck, but vocalist Rod Stewart, bassist Ronnie Wood, and pianist Nicky Hopkins, who gets the front of the house treatment. Evidence of that in the blues classic You Shook Me. Hopkins is louder in the mix than Stewart's voice. Rock My Plimsoll, Beck's showpiece, on par with Clapton's All Your Love with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. Groundbreaking guitar-based blues with a hard rock edge. I generally look at these two sides as the shapes of things to come. Now, who has the edge here? For live bands, Beck was untouchable. On those occasions I caught in person, it was not about Beck himself, but a shared respect for the side players with impeccable credentials. Beck didn't select according to marquee value. It was about having a foot in the future. How far could these players journey with Beck? Back to the question of the day. Is there one guitar god? I sincerely doubt it. The time has come to say goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye.
Already? Oh my goodness.
What a great day.
It flies by, Bill.
It does every week.
It does.
To everybody out there, have a great week.
Yeah, cozy up. Take this time to cozy up.
Jessica's advice.
Yep. We turn on some Netflix, maybe a little... Oh, what's that one you're watching?
Oh, The Reign of Del Sur.
Yeah.
There's only 174 episodes.
So get started on that.
Dig in. Have a great week.